If we could get the roll call, please.
Chad Engelkey. Janice Vidal. Here. Jimmy Stokes, absent. Mercer, Commissioner Mercer. Commissioner McGann, here. Commissioner Ware.
Here.
I forgot. Aker. Oh, I've got him. Commissioner Egner
Here.
and Commissioner Kirkley.
Here. I wonder if they ever gonna change that in the system.
Okay, we've got 7 commissioners present, 1 absent.
Okay, if everyone will stand, we'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I hope the commissioners got their packet and had have a chance to read over the previous meeting's minutes from June 26th. If so, if there's any discussion or otherwise, do we have a motion?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ware. Yes. Commissioner Egner.
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal. Here. Commissioner Kirkley.
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer.
Yes.
Commissioner McGann, yes.
Okay, I am gonna remind all the commissioners if y'all would speak into the microphone, because otherwise you have to make sure that y'all turn them on where it turns green, so that way everybody online can hear it along with everybody out there in the audience. So just make sure it's in front of y'all and y'all turn it on. All right, there is no old business, so we're moving on to new business. Case number 2108 SDFP, a request for approval of a subdivision final plat named Sage Creek Phase 1, located at approximately 5070 Goodman Road West in Horn Lake by Sage Creek Properties LLC, developer and owner, and W.H. Porter Consultants PLLC, engineering company, for land zoned PUD, consisting of 46.113 acres plus or minus and 32 lots. And this address was unofficial and unassigned. And now I will turn it over to Director Barr.
Thank you for that. Good evening to you, Mr. Chairman, and all, and a couple other housekeeping items, because you mentioned one. For those in the gallery, we do have the sign-in sheet in the back. If you could all sign in, that would be great. And then also there are some additional packets, some full packets tonight on the one chair there. So if you had any interest, and we also have the extra agendas. So yeah, have those items back there. So. Okay, I will continue here. So yeah, what we've got here is this particular case. Thank you for reading that, Mr. Chairman. Next slide, please. So what I've just got here, as what I usually do with the subdivision cases, is take a few excerpts from the zoning ordinance, in this case the subdivision regulations, since it's a subdivision that you're looking at, just to kind of tie in why we have it and why we do it and the different steps. So this has the title and purpose, the definition, like tonight, where it's a 32-lot subdivision where public improvements are planned for it. It would be considered a major subdivision by definition. Next slide, please. So this is just for the public's knowledge and your knowledge as well about the different procedures on the platting of a subdivision. A lot of people just don't normally think in platting or subdividing terms as far as taking a piece of ground and dividing it into something else or multiple lots. And so this kind of gives the procedure. Next slide. This particular slide, this is from Article 2, Section 3431, which is the final plat application procedure. Tells about what some of the things that are required for a submittal on a subdivision plat, and how it goes through the process and the review process. Next slide. So this talks about the final plat, which is actually before you tonight. And so this actually gets reviewed by you. So you're basically acting in the capacity of a recommending body on the particular case that's before you. And then the Board of Aldermen at a future meeting, probably the August 15th meeting for this particular plat, they would have final yay or nay consideration of. Next slide, please. This is from section 34-33, also from the subdivision regulations. And it says further here under items 1 and 2, all required improvements have been completed and inspected by the city, and a final resolution authorizing acceptance of the improvements has been acted upon by the mayor and board of aldermen. So that would be something that the applicant would have to do, and the city would have to do once, if it gets approved, and then they put in the public improvements, that sort of thing. There's a formal process as far as accepting those improvements. And it talks there about a surety bond to cover, usually it's the what things that are deficient, or if everything is sufficient, then there's usually like a warranty bond for a period of time. It could be a year, it could be 2 years or whatever, to ensure that the things that were built for public improvements will stay to a particular standard. Next slide. So this one here I pulled out of the subdivision regulations, because what's different about this case, because if you remember some time ago, this came before the city in the form of a PUD, a planned unit development. It had been off and on over the years by the city, and it was considered last year. And this writing here that I've got in bold print basically says that if it's a PUD, since there's enough requirements of the zoning ordinances on review, that there doesn't need to be a preliminary plat. So that's why in this case you're saying, well, Chad, I don't remember a preliminary plat. Well, it's because there wasn't one. We can basically skip over it because of all the things that are required on a PUD. And so that's what it says here. In submitting any PUD subdivision for approval, the prior action of the Planning Commission and the appropriate legislative body, which in this case is the Board of Aldermen, in granting the zoning application shall be sufficient preliminary plat approval within the meaning of Article 4, which is Article 4 of the subdivision regulations. So therefore, no preliminary plat specified in this Article 2 shall be required. So that's why we're going right to the final plat on this particular case, because of all the things that are required upon review of the rezoning on the PUD type of zoning. Next slide. So this here gets into section 34-85, which is some of the required minimum improvements. I won't go into those in great detail. Obviously, if you have questions or anything on that, we can delve into that. At the bottom of that particular slide, let's see, yeah, it says the mayor and board of aldermen shall reserve the right to select the type of performance surety used to guarantee improvements based upon the scope and magnitude of the required and or minimum public improvements. Next slide. This one has to do with the on a final plat approval, installation of required improvements. So it talks about those improvements and accepted of the constructed improvements and that warranty period that I was just speaking of. Next slide, please. So now here we have a map, and you can see the subject property or properties highlighted with the blue box. And the area that's under consideration tonight is towards the southern portion of the area. And you can see Goodman Road as it goes kind of east-west there that borders the subject properties along the south edge of those. And there's 3 areas. And we'll look at these other slides here in just a moment, areas 1, 2, and 3, and how they kind of like jigsaw together. Because the area is so large, it was hard to put it all on one slide or one piece of paper. So as the chair stated, this is proposal for 32 lots. The proposed area is 46.113 acres, plus or minus. New roads are proposed with this phase 1, and the main access would be from Goodman Road West. No floodplain is at play here, which that's a nice thing to see. So you don't have to worry about any designated official 100-year floodplain. The water provider would be Walls Water Association, and the sewer, sanitary sewer would be provided by the city of Horn Lake. And as I stated earlier, the zoning is the PUD, which is that planned unit development. Next slide. So this is first of the 3 areas. This would be in the lower, southwest corner of the area that was bounded in that previous slide by the kind of the gold box or the gold lining. And it shows the lots there. And when you see the COS, it has COSA there. That means common open space. So they're just designating it here as common open space A. Next slide. So this is area 2. So area 2 is east of area 1. And they kind of jigsaw together. You can see the match line there. I've tried to point that out. Again, this is more extension of common open space area, A. I think there's actually only like 1 or 2 lots that they're at the very upper left-hand corner on that particular area 2. Next slide, please. So this area 3 is the northern area of the 3. And again, it shows still more of that common open space A. And it also shows an area reserved for detention, which would be stormwater detention flowing off of the subdivision. And you can see more of the lots that are proposed there. Next slide. So we get into the subdivision plat requirements. And we just got several items here enumerated. Number 1, which has to do with easements. It's from section 34-58. And so we have what's indicated as a 10-foot wide front yard utility easement and 5 feet wide side and rear yards. But the subdivision regulations require a wider easement for the rear yard. So we would ask as one of the conditions, we'll see it later, please increase the rear yard utility easement widths to 10 feet per the standard. Number 2 here is from section 34-89. Again, more minimum standards to item D, which is drainage, and E, which is sidewalks. So there are proposing detention ponds with drainage easements heading to them. And those would be met if those pass city engineering approval upon their review. Let's see. And required sidewalks shall be installed across the frontages of each of the lots by the building permit holder prior to use and occupancy of the house or houses. This seems acceptable as a function from a timing and installation perspective. Next slide. This slide, again with minimum standards, deals about items F, which is water supply, and G, which is sanitary sewer systems. The actual standard per the subdivision ordinance says all subdivisions shall have proposed water system approved by appropriate state agency. The water system shall have enough outlets and be large enough to furnish an adequate water supply and fire protection to every lot. And G is a centralized sewage collection and treatment facility shall be provided on all lots in all subdivisions except as herein provided, and shall conform to all applicable state and local laws. And as I stated earlier, they're providing, their water provider would be Walls Water Association, and then the city of Horn Lake for providing the sanitary sewer service. So we'd be looking for review by the city's contracting engineering firm, Neil Schaefer, for approval of those designs. Next slide. Minimum standards continue. This has to deal with street lights and traffic signals and street signs. And without going into so much detail, we would have as a condition clarify the issue of street lights as far as where they would be provided in the subdivision, their design, their heights, those types of things. And they would also need to clarify as far as providing street signs as well, where those would be placed, that sort of thing. And then other items per the subdivision regulations, just upon review of the actual submitted plat. Number 5, add the section, township, and range in the title block on all the sheets. Number 6, correct the typo on the word planning with the Planning Commission on the Planning Commission certificate block on sheet 4. Number 7, eliminate the mayor attesting the signature of the chancery clerk on sheet 4. And then number 8, add wording to the plat whereby recording the plat would effectively dedicate the roads to the public. So next slide. This is the last slide. So you have the wording there on a possible motion with the conditions, as I kind of stated individually. They're kind of collectively listed, and I changed them from numbers to letters. So there's 8 of them. I won't state them again. So excuse me. If you have any questions, unless you have any questions, I would conclude the presentation.
Hi, thank you, Director Barr. I do have one question. Can you kind of give us a little update for our little history, because we have some new members on this board from the last time we seen Sage Creek and what was discussed between this board and the Board of Aldermen, best to your recollection?
Yes, thank you. I believe this was historically, Sage Creek has been under application from time to time in the city and has gone through various approvals and things changed. And last year was the most recent time for that. And if I remember correctly, I think they did approve in totality. It was like all phases considered. This is the first phase. It's the first 32 lots. I think there was the total of 275 lots. The previous approval was, I think, for 325. But there was a court case in Arizona that where some of the area that would be affected in the development was considered or deemed as federal wetlands. And so by that, the developer, landowner had to kind of go back to the drawing board, literally, just to make sure that they would not be interfering with this new determination through legal courses. So that's why they basically lowered the number of proposed lots from 325 to 275. So 275 lots were approved last year in a PUD through the PUD zoning. I believe the minimum house size was set at, I think, 1,800 square foot, heated and cooled. I think that actually the developer intends to go larger than that on some of the instances. Other than that, the other specifics I don't recollect them without going anything further, but that's the main thing that I remember.
I appreciate that. Okay. So does anybody on the commission have any questions for Director Barr?
I have a question. I'm not sure this is for Director Barr or not, but I'm going to ask it. The request is for, I think, 32 lots. Is that correct? I'm looking at the buildable area plan. I don't know if I should have dug this out or not, but in what I'm looking at, it's got 26 lots. I'm wondering where they got the space for the other houses, unless I'm looking at the wrong part of this map. And if I am looking at the wrong part of it, then it's way more than 32.
Good question. I guess it would probably depend on their phasing as far as where they drew the line. At least I'm counting 32, at least for phase 1. Now whether that matches their phase line from that plan from a year ago or not, that I don't know without looking at it specifically.
Are all of these houses going to be built west of Alpine Drive?
Is that specific just to this this particular phase? or are you just
I
talking?
think so, yeah. I don't know that Alpine Drive is on anything that you gave us today.
Yeah, if a person goes, maybe if Billy over there, thank you for manning the slides tonight. If you could go to area 3, so you're close there with that one. Go, I think, another 3. Nope, go the other direction. Another 3 slides to get area 3. Yeah, there we go. So that main road there that kind of curves, if I remember right, if it curves down, I think that would be Alpine. Even though I think the county said in the road naming that as it comes out of Willow Point Phase 3, once it changes enough direction, it can't be called Alpine anymore. It'll have to be called something else. But those lots there would be actually on the east side of that road, which I think previously was considered as Alpine Drive.
Okay,
So to answer the question, not all the lots would be on the west side. Some would be on the east side.
okay, I got it, thank you.
Any other questions for Director Barr? Is the applicant here today? Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Henry Porter with WH Porter, 6055 Primacy Parkway, Memphis, Tennessee, 38119.
All right, so does anybody have any questions for the applicant? No, I do have a question. Okay, so we're doing 32 on this phase 1, and the minimum's 1,800 square feet. And I know this has always been a question in the previous ones. Who's going to be who's designated as the builder in those 32?
I can't speak on that. I'd have to leave that to the developer. But I think this was Magnolia Homes over here.
Okay. Meridian. Okay. That was the last one that I heard was on those Meridian. I just wasn't sure if that had changed in the last since.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But again, like, that would be up to the developer.
I understand. I mean, I know you're not, I was just, that was the last we heard. I didn't know if you knew or not. Okay. Any questions for?
Yeah, the detention pond you got there, is it adequate for the drainage for the runoff, and right now is for,
This is good for future developments that actually drain into it.
you got plenty of volume for,
So this frankly has been oversized for this number coming in here. So it's actually sized for additional improved area upstream.
Any questions? Well, I guess not. Thank you, sir. All right, do we have any other discussion or do we have a motion?
Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Egner.
After review application case 2108, request for approval for a subdivision final plat named Sage Creek Phase 1, located at approximately 5070 Goodman Road West in Horn Lake by Sage Creek Properties LLC, developer and owner, W.H. Porter Consultants Engineering Company, and for land zoned at planned unit development consisting of 46.113 acres plus or minus 32 lots. Planning Commission recommends approval of the request.
Are you adding any of the conditions?
And the following conditions, A through H.
Okay, we have a motion. That's A through H. That takes care of that 10-foot. Is there, oh, I see what you say. Director Barr, on this motion, the A is saying the width of the rear yard. Is it supposed to be the rear or the front yard that needs to be increased to 10 feet?
Rear. Thank you for the question. It's the rear yard that needs to be increased to the 10-foot width.
All right, so we have a motion for approval, including conditions A through H. Do we have a second?
second,
We have an approval, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ware,
Yes.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal,
Yes.
Commissioner Kirkley,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner McGann, yes. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. All right, on to the next case, case number 2023-13. This is an alderman initiative for a potential text amendment to the City of Horn Lake's zoning ordinance initiated during the alderman meeting on June 20th of 2023 regarding the relationship between medical cannabis and dispensaries and schools and daycares within the jurisdiction. More specifically, is approved as conceived. The effect it would make would be to make medical cannabis dispensaries easier to establish in the city, and the limits, the locations where schools and daycares would be established via the city zone ordinances and via the city zone scheme. Potential text amendment would be to Article 12 use chart and possibly to Article 5 item T under medical cannabis of said city zone ordinances. I will turn this over to Director R.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you did. I tried to, in that particular write-up there, tried to kind of sum up the request. It's not one of those real neat and tidy ones, you know, where it's like we'd had with the subdivision, you know where it's at, and it's for so many lots, and it's phase one or whatever. So this is obviously, you got to change gears. This is a text amendment. There's 3 entities per Mississippi state law that can initiate a text amendment to, in this case, the zoning ordinance for the city. That would be the Board of Aldermen, which this is the case that we have before us. Also, the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission can do that, or private property owner can do that with an application, but there's a fee associated with that. So, so in this case, it came from the Board of Aldermen back on June the 20th. And so I'll just kind of go through the slides here, excuse me, on this particular case. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, to start off with is the definition of daycare center, which is per Article 2, Item B, number 28 in the city's zoning ordinance. And I'll just read it here. A daycare center, a facility which provides shelter and personal care on a regular basis for 6 or more children who are not related within the 3rd degree, computed according to civil law to the operator for 4 or more hours of any part of a 24-hour day, or such place be organized or operated for profit or not. The term daycare center includes child care facility, kindergarten, nurseries, or other facility that falls within the scope and definition set forth above, regardless of auspices. In the Mississippi state law on medical cannabis dispensary, there is a relationship between said dispensaries, schools, daycares, and churches, or you could deem those as religious institutions. In the city of Horn Lake, via the zoning ordinance, Article 5, Item T, that equates to 1,700 feet of separation between dispensaries and those 3 previously listed land uses. So in the state law, those were set at 1,000 feet of separation, but the city, when they enacted the medical cannabis dispensary ordinance, if you will, that portion in the zoning earlier in the year set those at 1,700 feet of separation. So what we felt was appropriate, since there's already daycares, there's licensed daycares within the city of Horn Lake operating currently. We sent them each basically the same legal notice that we put in the newspaper, and we mailed that to those. So if you could go to the next slide there, Billy. Yeah, thank you. So this next slide actually has, there's 4 daycares that are established and operating within Horn Lake that have business licenses from the city. The zoning of each property is listed. And as I stated, these were mailed notices back on July the 10th. The businesses are the following. Number 1, the La Petite Academy of Horn Lake at 2563 Goodman Road West. Zoning there is C-3. Number 2, Kids Are Kids Academy of Horn Lake at 6468 US Highway 51 North with C4 zoning. Number 3, Mighty Kids Daycare and Learning Center at 6285 Ridgewood Road / Drive. That has residential 8 zoning. And then number 4, Busy Bundles of Joy at 5511 US Highway 51 North. That has commercial 4 zoning. The city currently is processing some plans with the hopes of turning them into building permits for what used to be the CVS Pharmacy location, which is at 1502 Goodman Road West in town. But those have not been finalized as of yet. So moving on to the next slide. So what we've got here, I tried to put, there's basically 4 slides. There's 2 slides in 2 groups. One showing the existing chart and proposed chart of the commercial land uses. And then the next 2 will have to do with other land uses. So here we've got the existing chart. This is just an excerpt, just right from Article 12 of the city zoning ordinance, the use chart for commercial uses. And this is how it occurs currently. And what you'll see there is the P in each one of those land use categories and zoning districts stands for permitted. So it's permitted by right. Doesn't need a conditional use. It's permitted. It means that it can just happen with regular entitlements, building permits, that sort of thing. And then you see that number 31. So the number 31 actually in the chart is a footnote, so it's very small. So in this case, I just wrote it out in regular font so we could see it a little bit better. And so you could see it there for daycare centers. It's permitted in those districts that it's listed with that footnote 31. So the footnote 31 of the, as I said, is a footnote. It deals with 5 listed standards that are specific for daycares in the community. For example, one of those items, number 1, requires a fenced recreational area of not less than 4,000 square feet to be provided for the first 20 children served at such a facility. And then also that next line there is school, either public or private. You can see that they're currently permitted by right in the C1, C3, and C4 zoning districts. So next slide. So these are the proposed changes. As you can see, there's a reduction in the number of zoning districts where those land uses would be permitted by right, and would just be remaining in the C1 zoning district. Now, the note here on this particular slide, it says here the change proposed here would make it so only daycare centers and schools, either public or private, would only be allowed, as I stated, by right in the C1 zoning district. If already established in the currently zoning districts by right, the change would make those uses non-conforming uses. In the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, via Article 9, Item B, items, see number 1 through 8, makes non-conforming uses impossible to expand, enlarge, or terminates their reestablishment should they be damaged by more than 50% of their fair market value. That's actually very boilerplate languages. I mean, in the different zoning districts, the jurisdictions that I've worked at, that's very boilerplate language. You think of what the jurisdiction is trying to accomplish when it sets up its zoning ordinance and its zoning scheme. It has permitted land uses, and then it has ones that are non-conforming. And through the non-conforming language, it tries to make them more difficult to continue to reestablish. So the idea is that they would be phased out over a period of time. So obviously people can debate how that is all set up and whether that's fair or not or whatever, but that's the basically boilerplate language with a non-conforming use, that it's by definition it's harder for it to continue, or it's harder for it to reestablish if it's damaged. And the 50% of their fair market value as far as the damage level is fairly a boilerplate across the country. Next slide. So this is the existing chart from the zoning ordinance under the category of other permitted uses. So what we saw before was for commercial land uses, or what they consider commercial land uses. Here it's just under the category of other permitted uses. And you can see, as what it states there, the daycare centers, and then the schools. Now, in this case, regardless of what happens with what's been initiated by the alderman, there's kind of an anomaly on this line. If you see the daycare centers, it has the letter S, which there's no key in the ordinance. I mean, obviously, we just kind of intuitively say, well, P stands for permitted. If it's the letter C, it's a conditional use. And if it's empty, that means that land use is not allowed there in any way, shape, or form. In this case, this is the only place in the table, I believe, where it has the letter S. And I'm not really sure what the letter S stands for because there's no key. So I'm assuming that it probably means like a conditional use. Perhaps at one time in the city's lexicon of conditional uses, before they were called conditional uses, maybe they were called special uses. I've seen those lots of times in different jurisdictions used almost interchangeably. So if nothing else happens, it would be nice to just turn the letter S here into like a C, the letter C, or P, or whatever the desire of the city would be. So just to kind of end that confusion on that. So next slide. Okay, I guess I just explained that. I guess I explained it too soon before I got to the slide. Sorry about that. Yes, okay. So next slide. So what we've got here is just a possible motion by the Planning Commission, which is basically in this case, like I stated earlier, is a recommending body to the Board of Aldermen on the question that's before you. So that would conclude the presentation unless you'd have any questions.
Well, thank you, Director Barr. This particular case, is it open for public discussion at the end of our discussion?
It is.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Director Barr?
I have a question. Go back to non-conforming uses. It's not possible for them to expand, enlarge, and you terminate if 50% or more is damaged. What if they want to change ownerships?
Excellent question, Commissioner Egner. The ownership wouldn't really go into that equation, if you will. So it could still, if it was a non-conforming use, it could still go to a new owner if they wanted to sell it to a different party or person, or however that would be organized. So that would be of no effect. It's mainly the way they have the zoning set up in this jurisdiction or others is if it's actually damaged based upon its value. So that would be like through flood or fire or tornado or some type of storm damage. If it was significant enough that let's say the facility was worth $1 million. Well, let's say if the damage was over 50%, over $500,000, they could not reestablish. We wouldn't be able to give them building permits to reestablish there unless they got the zoning changed or they came into conformance with the zoning. So which as far as what's proposed here might prove difficult or impossible based upon what's proposed.
Thank you.
I have a question. So in order to facilitate cannabis dispensaries, we're trying to ensure that all schools, daycare, and whatever are now only can come up in C4 zones.
Good question again. So basically what's proposed, if a person goes back to, let's see, I want to make sure.
C1, sorry, I meant C1.
Okay, yeah, so what's proposed is that it would eliminate the, where it's permitted land use in a lot of those commercial districts, and it would just basically allow it to be permitted just in the C1 zoning district. Yeah, that's what's proposed. So.
Even though none of the current ones are in. So they won't be able to get any variance or anything? You won't approve that? Be able to approve anything?
I love that question. A variance, now remember with a variance, that's done, a variance would be for, let's say like a height variance. Let's say if there was a standard in the zoning ordinance from height maximum, somebody could ask for a variance from that for some type of structure, house or building or whatever. Another variance, example of a variance would be for setback. All the districts have setback bulk standards for the front yard, side yards, rear yards. So that would be another instance for a variance. So if somebody wants to change a use, let's say from one use to another land use, we look at the chart, the land use chart, and we see if it's permitted. It's permitted only through a conditional use or not permitted. So that wouldn't be a variance. We would never use a variance for a use change. A variance would be for like those items that I specified earlier. But if somebody wanted to change the use, it would either be through a rezoning or conditional use, or if the chart said where it's not permitted, then it would not be an alternative at all.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Director Barr? Yes. You have a question for yourself?
I think I do. No, actually what I wanted to make sure I didn't leave out is that because we notified the stakeholders, and we did receive input from one of those, and so I just wanted to go on record. We had a question that came to the city. It's dated back on July the 20th. It's from somebody named Aggie Gordon, and that's the owner of the Kids Are Kids here at the 6468 US 51 North. I don't know if it's one of the parties that is present here tonight or not, but they had several questions over what was being proposed, and so I did respond back to that particular individual today. I just left a voicemail. We actually haven't spoke specifically on the request with that particular property owner.
Okay, all right. Any other questions for Director Barr?
I have one more question. So like schools, like the cannabis dispensary what's the distance between like the school and the cannabis dispensary? Is there the same?
Very good question. Yeah, right now the way the city has it set up, when they enacted the medical cannabis dispensaries wording amendment to the zoning ordinance back in March, is that they set the distance of separation between a dispensary and an existing, let's say, school, church, or daycare at 1,700 feet. So that's the distance. So now if, let's say, right now the city has one, it's not operational yet, but the state recognizes it over, I believe the address is it the 1415 Goodman Road West? Yeah, 1415 Goodman Road West. It's one of the suites over on the Bullfrog corner. So the state recognizes that state license. They issued it or whatever. Now they're not operational yet, but they'll recognize that as basically being there for 18 months from when they issued the state license. So now once the dispensary, where they've issued the license, it still is able for school or a church or daycare to come within that area of the dispensary. But if, let's say, if there's a school or a daycare or a church that's already operational, the 1,700 feet keeps a dispensary from those land uses that are already established. So like a school or a church or daycare can come into the 1,700 feet area, but if the school, church, or daycare is established first, the dispensary, it buffers them out. So that's how that comes into play.
Right. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to open this up for a public meeting. All right, we're going to have Francis go in and come up here first. You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I don't need 3 minutes either.
Okay.
My name is Francis J. Miller, 14-year voting resident of Horn Lake. You need to grandfather right these 4 businesses that they do not get touched in any way, shape, or form to sell dope to anybody, even if it's medical marijuana. You established, Horn Lake did those signs that are 600 feet tall up there by Highway 55. Grandfathered right in. Everybody else wants them, but they did get grandfathered in, and they're not touched. These 4 businesses should be grandfathered in, and put your medical marijuana or anything else outside. Don't touch these businesses.
All right, do we have anybody else that would like to speak? Go ahead and come up and state your name and address for us, please.
Hello, my name is Keon Shea Moore, address 1502 Goodman Road West. I am the owner of Little Scholars Academy and Home Away from Home. We're proposing for the Little Scholars at the CVS location. And I would like to speak in regards to that. if you limit the locations where schools and daycares could be established as an already established owner, via the city zoning ordinance and the city scheme, you are limiting parents who can work near this area. You are limiting the growth of kids. You are limiting the convenience for parents that need to provide a living for their children. As a already established owner, every center in Horn Lake is full to capacity. If you call any one of those centers that you listed on that board, if you call any other center outside of that you listed, they're full. They cannot take any more kids until after the end of August. Kids Are Kids being one, Little Scholars being one. My center has been full for the last 2 years. We are trying to move into the CVS location to give us room to grow for more kids. We have not been able to accept kids in that location for 2 years unless another child goes to kindergarten. That shows how full everyone in DeSoto County are. I get over 75 calls a day for people, parents asking for child care centers, infants in specific, parents that are having new babies. They have nowhere to take their new babies. When you look at the child care ratio, you are looking at, you can only have 2 teachers per 10 infants. And every center has ratio that they have to follow by the state of Mississippi. Not only do you have a staff to child ratio, but you have a building code ratio as well. When you exceed that building code ratio, you cannot accept any more kids without violating your license. You have to look at us as owners that have parents begging us daily, I need a place for my kids in order to work. I need a place for my kids in order to go to school. I need a place for my child to go, and I have nowhere to take my child. So that leaves it where this will increase the amount of unlicensed centers that you have, well, I would like to say unlicensed home daycares that you will have within the city. If these parents are forced to take their kids to unlicensed home daycares, they can be unsafe. Not only that, but they're not licensed. Why wouldn't you want more licensed center within the city so that it can keep from parents having to be forced to take their kids to these unlicensed places? When you ask women, what are the barriers to improving your family's income, you learn something surprising. All around the world, in low, middle, and high-income countries, they cite the same thing, childcare. Without a safe and healthy place for their young children to go, mothers are less able to earn more money to help support the family. We all know in today's time, women have to work. Not only do women have to work, but you have those single moms who don't have family here, who don't have people to help them. We are building houses within Horn Lake. We are putting restaurants here. We are putting so many great things here, Chick-fil-A, Starbucks. All these great things are coming to Horn Lake. What about the child care centers? We will need child care centers in order to have places for these people to take their kids to. Not only that, but so many people are moving from the Delta, their first stop, Horn Lake, then South Haven. When they stop here in Horn Lake and they realize, I don't have anywhere near home to take my child, I would have to drive all the way to Memphis or South Haven or Olive Branch to take my child in order to go to work. And then if I work in Horn Lake and live in Horn Lake, just imagine how inconvenient that is when you have nowhere to take your child and you work in Horn Lake. I'm not sure if you all remember, but when the pandemic hit and schools and daycares was forced to close, and some daycares stayed open, which was my center as well, Little Scholars, when these parents was in that position where they didn't have places to take their kids to school, they couldn't work, which caused a hiring crisis within so many areas, us being one. When we have those hiring crises within the areas, not only do it present a problem for the restaurants and the business owners who have to hire people to work within this city, but they don't have places to take their kids. Not only do that cause a problem, but then we get bad customer service. Within all these places that we're bringing here, we don't want our service to be bad at a Chick-fil-A or Starbucks or whatever we're bringing in because these people can't find childcare and they cannot provide a place for their child to go in order to work. So as we continue to talk about the growth of Horn Lake, please let's consider childcare within that growth. If you limit to C1 zoning, I have already actually looked into the research. The buildings, where are they going to come from? There's none. There's no places to establish a center within those areas already existing. So how can we limit to that when there's nowhere to grow in that area? Not only that, but this will slow the spread of much-needed child care center if no building is available within the area. We are getting kids ready for kindergarten. We provide skills for kids under 5 needed. Licensed child care centers have also have to go by the nutrition plans, which not only do we provide learning, but we give these children protein and vitamins because we follow the state nutrition plans. So we keep their weight down, we keep them healthy, we keep them in check. Some of these kids don't get that in their environments that
Ma'am,
they're
you're going to
in.
have to finish it up.
So
We're-
sorry.
You're
So to wrap
past your
that,
3
to
minutes.
wrap that up, just within the month of July, we received 516 calls for Child Care Center. 2,418 people visit our Google site looking for childcare. In the month of July alone, 66 people found us on Google searching daycares in Horn Lake. So let's just please keep that perspective in mind when we're thinking about limits in child care centers.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? All right, this public hearing is closed.
Can I say something before we? She said her daycare center was Little Scholar, but I don't see that on the list. I see 4, so is this a licensed daycare center? Why is only 4 and it would be 5? Little Scholar is not on this.
What?
No, she was saying probably it's in C1.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was asking.
So I do have a question, Director Barr, and it was on a comment that the public had made, is that the initiative for the bringing everything into C1. Do you know why the alderman wanted to limit from all the other ones to the C1? Because I mean, I just to clarify on that, why they were wanting to make the change from
I was fixing that.
all the way to the C1.
Oh, thank you for the question. Yeah, the C1 was not specified by the Board of Aldermen. Basically, they were just they had the initiative or whatever. It was something that staff, we had come up with or whatever to leave some vestige for daycares to be able to establish in a commercial zoning district. So that was basically on staff, and we come up with something. We also worked with legal counsel. We looked at some different alternatives to try to fulfill what was desired from the initiative. And still we had within the legal parameters that we could come up with or they're already existing. So that's where that came from.
So what can we do? Because I agree with what she's saying. That was my question. If you limit them to just C1, you're limiting the businesses. So what can we do as a group? Because so far 2 is in C4.
So the difficulty here is from the task that's been presented based upon the initiative is that we're basically trying to perform surgery through zoning, and I don't think zoning as a tool was really meant to perform surgery on the scale that we're kind of looking at here. So that's why that was one of the reasons why we left the C1 in as an alternative. I mean, zoning was never meant to be.
Can I, and I don't mean to interrupt, but can you kind of, maybe I'm just missing it. Exactly what is the overall purpose of the initiative? I mean, I know that, we already established that they have to be 1,700 feet away from each other and away from all these. And I knew that at one time there was a map showing where dispensaries would fit, for the most part, within that guidelines. And I thought that was already established, but then we get this initiative, and maybe I'm missing exactly what they're requesting on why we're trying to make a text amendment and make some of these changes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as stated earlier, and you probably understand, there's this relationship through state law, and then we've carried that through, the city has in its medical cannabis dispensaries, zoning text amendment that the city put into play back in March, that there's this interplay because of the separation, because of the distances. And that's one thing that's one thing if you wanted, you wanted further, that's because we didn't put it in this particular, your packet or whatever, it was those maps, those distances or whatever, perhaps that would have been helpful in your decision or your recommending capacity to the board. But I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to expand the ability for medical cannabis dispensaries to be established in town because there's this interplay between the two land uses or these land uses that have been talked about tonight. Is that they were specific as far as they wanted to make it easier for the cannabis dispensaries to establish, and so what we tried to do as staff is try to carry on their request And this is what we came up with as a potential solution. So whether you deem that's a very good solution or not, I mean, that's up to your discretion, really.
So then my question, follow up that is if they're trying to make it easier for the dispensaries, then isn't the fact that the city has put it at 1,700 feet is what has been restricting, and wouldn't changing it to the state standard actually accomplish what they're looking for?
That is a good thought. That's a very, very valid thought, because they set it at the 1,700 feet of separation amongst the different land uses. Apparently, my takeaway on it is apparently they didn't want to go there. They wanted to leave the distances set as what they are. And so we got the directive or the initiative that's before us tonight.
They can leave the distance, but what I don't understand is why to accommodate these dispensary. We're saying that the daycare, they can't expand, they can't do this, they can't do that. I don't agree with that, and that is not right.
Right.
We're trying to
Director
bring
Barr,
in medical marijuana, but the kids don't have anywhere to go and the businesses cannot expand. That's just too much limitation. I think the 1,700.
Yeah, the ones that are already established, why would they have to be rezoned?
And they don't know they're not in compliance.
Well, that's a very good question. The ones that are established now, let's say as far as what's proposed gets enacted, gets approved or whatever, their zoning actually would not change out there. Let's say if they're operating under C3 or C4, they could still continue to operate. It's just that they would no longer be conforming. They would be non-conforming based upon what's proposed here tonight.
And what does that mean? Would they
Well, what
not
that,
be able to continue to operate or not continue to expand?
they could
not
continue
expand?
they could continue to operate just through the regular zoning ordinance wording, which is fairly boilerplate from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, is that when it becomes non-conforming, then it becomes harder to expand. It becomes harder, more difficult to reestablish. Let's say if they were damaged by that 50% number that we've seen tonight. So.
Can they be grandfathered in? Can there be an exception for those
Well,
ones that are
basically
listed?
they would be grandfathered because they would continue to establish. They could continue
Right.
to go on.
But they wouldn't be able to expand or
Right.
anything like that?
The auspices of the whole idea of nonconformity is that the state, in this case a city, it could be a county if they were talking at the county level, is trying to phase out a nonconforming land use. So if you think about, a lot of times I'll think of, if you think about things through zoning, a lot of it is a battle of will. And so like when there is a zoning ordinance that's in play, whatever it be, with the number of cars a person has, inoperable vehicles, signage, setbacks, land use, or whatever, they have the standards that's set up by the jurisdiction. So whatever it would be, let's say it's 10 foot for a setback, or you have 3 cars that you can have inoperable and that's legal, or whatever the standard is. So, and then if there's a violation of that, whatever the standard is that we're talking about, to enforce that, you're talking about a battle of will. So you're talking about the will of the state, in this case the city, versus the will of the individual. So those come into play. They're at play all the time. We as staff, we deal with that almost every day. Code enforcement certainly deals with it every day. The battle of the will of the individual to carry on what they're trying to do, which might be, to violate a particular zoning standard or city code standard. And then the will of the jurisdiction to make everything into conformance. So through the non-conforming area of the zoning ordinance, you see through a period of time, there's this effort or this will of in this case, the city, to bring those non-conforming land uses either into non-existence or to make them more difficult to continue exist. So as far as what's proposed here tonight, those uses, if they're already legally established in, let's say, a C3 zone or a C4 zoning district, they can continue to exist. They're non-conforming, but if something happens to them where they're damaged by that 50% or more percentile, then basically they cannot reestablish. We wouldn't be able to, as staff, if they walked in the door to pull a building permit to reestablish, we wouldn't be able to give them one. They would have to come under zoning conformance first, which might mean a rezoning, or there may not be an option for them at all. So that's what that means.
Mr. Barr, Commissioner, Chairman, all you're saying I agree with, but in the same instant, we're creating the circumstances for these businesses to now become non-compliant. And I do not agree with that. I cannot agree with that just to create medical marijuana dispensary. I think that is just wrong and unjust.
I agree with you.
You know, it's just not right. So, for me, we should deny it, let the Board of Aldermen decide, and the people go speak their truth. I think it is wrong. It is so wrong.
Chairman,
Yes.
I feel like the Board of Aldermen made it difficult for medical marijuana facilities to become established because they wanted it to be difficult for them to become established. And now that's created a direct conflict between medical marijuana dispensaries and schools, churches, and daycares. And we're trying to fix the conflict by making the schools, churches, and daycares knuckle under. And I think the burden should be on the medical marijuana stores. And so I think we ought to leave the schools, churches, and daycares alone and put the burden of separation on the medical marijuana facilities.
Chairman, well, I agree with what he said. A while back, was there some discussion about districting areas for the cannabis operations, like Dancy Boulevard was even mentioned one time, I believe. And then some isolated areas were there, but to penalize the daycares and schools, I agree, it's just not right. I mean, these are businesses and things that the daily people need, and why cater to the cannabis people when these people are established and there is a demand out there for the children?
As a devil's advocate question, are we being bombarded with requests for more daycares to be opened up?
I'm just trying to remember as staff what we've seen. The one lady that's here tonight, she's trying to become operational at that 1502 Goodman Road West location. Other than that, I don't know. There was some entitlement work that was done, and you may remember it last year, where they tried to establish from where the Little Scholars is now, a couple of doors to the west.
Right.
And so, but I think they've shifted the efforts over to the 1502 Goodman Road site. I don't recall, unless Andrew can think of something where we've had other requests that have come to the department to establish either in an existing commercial zone or like in a residence. Because obviously from the table, the daycares can be established in a residential district if they meet certain criteria and such. So I don't recall other requests other than one.
Passing this really wouldn't affect anybody right now, but I think it would create a negative atmosphere in the entire city with regard to daycares. And, I was in the retail business for a long time, and I can't begin to tell you how many phone calls I got from employees that said, I can't come to work today because I don't have anybody to watch my children. And I think this is a huge need. I don't know that anybody's rushing in to fill that need. I wish they would. But I don't think we ought to create a negative atmosphere for them to do that.
Yeah, at least in the discussions we've had, that we do know that as far as trying to break in like with a brick and mortar as far as a daycare, one of the things that could be kind of cost prohibitive to folks would be the requirement of the sprinkling within that facility. So whether it's in a home or whether it's in a building in a commercial district or whatever, that would always be a requirement. I think it's of the fire code for that category or that type of land use, is that the sprinkling, the overhead sprinkling be provided, which sometimes can be a cost barrier to entry into that, providing that type of land use.
Thank you.
I got a question I need to ask you. What would happen is that the marijuana people trying to get this fixed in place as quickly as possible, because in '24, Congress is trying to outlaw these things. Now, what happens if Congress does write the laws and outlaws it? What happens to the ones that are existing?
Be a city problem.
I have no idea. I
State
don't know.
issue.
I don't know what you're speaking of, if it's specific to zoning, or if it's just more in general for land uses across the country, or if they're targeting specific states that have allowed like recreational marijuana for use, or if they're more on the medical side of things. I don't know. I can't comment with any type of knowledge.
So do we have any more questions, comments about the initiative in front of us? All right, do we have any type of motion?
I'll make the motion.
All right,
After reviewing case number 2023-13, is it AI, the Board of Alderman Initiative, AI, for a potential text amendment to the City of Horn Lake zoning ordinance initiated from their 6/20/2023 meeting regarding the establishment of medical cannabis dispensaries, daycare center, and schools, both public and private, the Horn Lake Planning Commission recommends denial of said initiative as outlined previously in this presentation to Article X11, use chart of said city zoning ordinance.
Second.
all right, we have a motion and a quick second. Do we have any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Who was the second?
Egner, Commissioner Egner.
Okay, so commissioners, this is, you're voting for denial, so you would say yes to denial. Commissioner Ware?
Yes to deny.
Commissioner Egner?
Yes to denial.
Commissioner Vidal?
Yes to denial.
Commissioner Kirkley?
Yes to denial.
Commissioner Mercer?
Yes to denial.
Commissioner McGann, yes to denial. We have 6 yeses. The motion is denied.
All right, thank y'all. So next is an update on the comprehensive plan. So I will, for other business, I will turn this to our staff and for our update of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, on the comprehensive plan, obviously the planning consultant, Orion Planning Group, they had their city meetings, and there was stakeholder meetings as well back in July, held that week of July the 10th through the, was it the 13th or the 14th, that particular week on the calendar. Those were fairly well attended, especially the evenings of the planning, where the public was involved. That Monday night and that Thursday night, we had about roughly, 20 come. To some, that may not sound very much, may not sound very representational, but I know that from working in other jurisdictions, this is my 4th comprehensive plan update and redo. That's decent attendance. I mean, I've been to plenty of public meetings where, public input was sought and either nobody showed up or there was just a scant 1 or 2 people. And so when you get 20, I mean, may not sound like a lot in a community of 27,000, but that's not bad. So would have been nice to have better or more? Absolutely, but it was decent. So so I thought the interplay between those that did attend and the planning consultant was decent. So and so I think the public survey portion has been closed, and so now that the planning consultant is working on the actual plan, the written plan, I think they're going to have something to us, I believe, in the month of September, and then so that means there would be something that would be for this planning commission probably in the month of October. So and then so you'd have to look it over, and you'd have a chance to ask questions and that sort of thing, and then make at some point in time, like in October, make a recommendation on the comprehensive plan as far as what's brought before you to the Board of Aldermen. So that's what we know so far on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, does any of the commissioners have anything?
Sorry. I had something I wanted to say. Is this, chairman, is this your second year as chairman?
We're approaching, I think, the end of the second year.
Yes. Remember, we had decided that you would be for 2 years and then give somebody else an opportunity to be for the next 2 years. That was what we had voted on. I think that was in August, 2 years ago.
I don't know when I actually took over, but I mean,
Whenever you took over, I
I
think it
don't-
was August, maybe the 2 years.
We can go back and look and see if that was, we can try to go back to the minutes. Probably we would target like July or August of, I guess, 2021. That was prior to my tenure here with the city as well. And just see what that substance was, if it was a 1-year thing or a 2-year,
2 years.
years, and see what that timing is. And then what we find out from that research, based upon what we find out, we can, if it needs to be put back on the agenda for the Planning Commission to reconsider for chair and vice chair, we certainly could do that for like the month of August or whatever it turns out to be. If we should have done it this month,
Yes. I just don't
or-
want us to spring it on.
yeah. So, yeah, that way the Planning Commission can have an opportunity to vote on that again. If that was a 2-year, basically a term for like Planning Commission chair and vice chair.
all right, so do we have anything else? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion to adjourn.
All right, everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same?